All right, everyone, welcome Howard Katchen. Woo! Howard, if you can take it away and introduce yourself and a little bit about your histories, and we'll have Q&A later on as well, and fire away.
Certainly. Well, thanks so very much for having me with you today. I do want to assure you that we are here in our Hollywood Squares boxes on a Zoom call, which is always a nice way for us to gather, especially at this hour of the morning. At the outset, I want to assure you, absolutely, I solemnly swear, I am not wearing bunny slippers. So, unlike other people who may be. My story in real estate actually begins going back 4 generations. My great-grandparents on my mother's side came to the United States from Russia in 1892, having fled Tsarist Russia and anti-Semitism to seek their future in America, and landed in Chicago. Well, at that point, they owned a dry goods store, but unbeknownst to me how it all happened, but they also became involved as what would be deemed as middlemen in land transactions. So what they would do is they would engage with a land seller, and they would take an option, a buyer's option on that land, and put down a small deposit as their earnest money. And then in turn, they would go out and find a developer who wanted to buy the land from them. And then they would sell the option contract to the developer at a markup. And then whatever the difference was between what they had committed to pay for the property and what they sold it to the developer was their net out, or their net profit. And that pretty much speaks to the very beginnings of real estate and how it was practiced prior to the days of licensure and organized real estate. So again, going back 4 generations, this knowledge and or the practice seeped down. My grandmother, who came from Chicago to Los Angeles in 1940, after my grandfather passed away, she thought that she would seek her fortune and fame and better weather for sure from Chicago out here in Los Angeles. And initially, she had no idea what she wanted to do. She had a brother out here who had purchased a piece of property and suggested to her, well, why don't you get a real estate license and become involved in it? So she went, studied, got a broker's license, and then proceeded to open up her own business. So she became a female broker owner in 1940 Los Angeles, when real estate was very much a male-dominated type of business. She had a very difficult time for a couple of reasons. Number one, she had come out with my mother and my uncle, who were then high school age. And from the outset in Los Angeles, it wasn't a very welcoming place to her. See, back in Los Angeles, there was a lot of prejudice. My grandmother being a widowed Jewish woman with 2 teenage kids, couldn't find a place to rent in Los Angeles. It took literally months until she finally did. Because I don't know how many of you are familiar, but if you ever go back in the annals of time and look up advertisements, such for properties that were available for rent at the time, and or see any photographs from that era where there were pictures of signs advertising properties for rent, it was very common to see such words on signs as for rent, no Jews, no Negroes, no dogs. And that was her welcome to Los Angeles. So finally, she found a place to rent. And at that time, the landlord made it very clear to her that he was renting to her on the notion that she would not tell anybody in the building that she was Jewish. She would not hang, which is very common, a mezuzah or any sign of being Jewish on the door. And she wouldn't do quote unquote Jewy type things. So
Wow,
as
that's wild. That
right,
wasn't too long ago either.
yeah,
I mean,
no, it's very true. And so she proceeded. She hung her shingle out and opened her brokerage. Well, the men were not very accepting of her, and thus any and all leads or any opportunities to look for clients in the immediate area of her brokerage, which was over in West Los Angeles, she was pretty much shut out of the business. And she, in essence, was forced into dealing with people others weren't dealing with, and those were minority clients. So she was dealing with Black people, with Hispanic people, and Asian people primarily. Now, what was the major issue at that time? How do you purchase a piece of property? Typically, you purchase it with mortgage financing. Well, mortgage financing just wasn't available to, unfortunately, quote unquote, those type of people. So it was a very difficult trudge for her to break into the business there. However, she finally found a friendly mortgage broker who was able to assume a certain amount of risk, and she was able to arrange financing for these minority clients. And then she would find them a home, sell them a home, and that's how she began. The next step was she was a firm believer in freedom of choice. So a lot of these minority clients would want to go and live in areas which were predominantly white neighborhoods. And she had no problem with that. So she would show them properties over there and would many times enter into contracts with the home seller, sell the home, and thus was quote unquote, I'm sure you've heard the term when you were studying for your real estate license or thereafter, she was blockbusting. That means integrating neighborhoods. Now, I don't know how many of you are exactly familiar with the National Association of Realtors Code of Ethics, but it goes back to the beginnings of NAR. And that's one of our certainly prides and our calling as a profession. However, in 1924, there was a section of it, which section 34, if I'm not mistaken. And allow me to quote from it. If I can turn this and see it better this way. In essence, it says, in sum, what it says is that a realtor is not to go and change the composition of a neighborhood, which implies they're introducing minority clients into a white neighborhood because it will affect the value of the neighborhood. And so, because of what my grandmother was doing, she was deemed as being in violation of the Realtor Code of Ethics and was brought before what was then the Los Angeles Realty Board repeatedly. She was sanctioned and fined and sanctioned and fined, but that didn't deter her because she felt that her mission was to help people find housing. And it didn't matter what race, creed, religion, they deserved housing. And so she persisted, and she went on to become involved in organized real estate at the Los Angeles Realty Board, where she served as parliamentarian. And then eventually in the 1960s, she was elected to be president of the Los Angeles Realty Board. And during her tenure as president of the Realty Board, she brought about a lot of particular changes. She made the Realty Board, she humanized it. She made it a place where all people could feel comfortable, albeit not all people were entirely accepted. And just let me mention too, that for any of you who are not all lily white people, NAR, CAR, local real estate association would not have allowed you to become members. Because again, it was very discriminatory. So my grandmother, because of her experiences, kind of served as a beacon for us. As I mentioned, I'm fourth generation in real estate, but my mother was a property manager. My father and my uncle were developers. And I come to real estate, actually, it's my third career. Now, I'm sure that there are many amongst you too who may have done something else prior to coming into real estate. But in my case, I was a rebellious kid. You wouldn't think of it now, but I just decided that I wanted to do my own thing. And so I made a point, I wanted to go through university, and I graduated from the University of Southern California. So at the outset, I want to say that some of you who may be UCLA Bruins, I consider you to be my friends, except when it's football season, then we can have another discussion. So I did that, and then I received a fellowship and ended up going and living in London, England for 4 years, where I pursued 2 master's degrees, one at the London School of Economics and International Political Economy, and an MBA at the London Business School. London was a wonderful experience for me because it exposed me to the world. I met a lot of people there, in fact, many of whom I'm still friends with today, who are global citizens. And it was during that time, actually, that I became an entrepreneur. Met some fellows from California. One night we were sitting around, we had a craving for a fast food Mexican. And we discovered that there wasn't anything in London. So what do you do when you want something and it's not there? Of course, you go and you create it yourself. So we put together a business plan. We threw together a few $1,000s each, rented a storefront on Tottenham Court Road near the Underground station, and eventually set up what we believed to be was the very first Mexican fast food restaurant in London. At first, that was a rough go, but people started to come by out of utter curiosity, enjoyed the food, and by word of mouth, it spread. It became very successful, and we opened up another location elsewhere. And it was during that time, too, that during one of the summers, I received a grant from the United Nations Association to do some further research on the thesis that I had written, which was on international labor migration. So I found myself shuttling, as it were, between Egypt and Israel at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem and the American University in Cairo, and doing research and interviews, investigating how international migration was affecting the Egyptian economy, social, political, etc. Because at that time, this was back in 1979. Of course, there was the OPEC and the oil prices. So there was a lot of petrodollars, as they were called, flowing into Saudi Arabia, into the Gulf area, and through that part of the Arab world. And that part of the Arab world did not have infrastructure, and it didn't have professional people who could fill various roles, such as lawyers and teachers and doctors. However, Egypt, on the other hand, was a relatively poor country compared, but because of the language, because of culture, religion, and the Egyptian economy tended to produce a lot of professional people in the categories that were needed by Saudi and the Gulf. So therefore, that created the migration stream from Egypt over to there and created multilateral relationships that had not only financial impact, but political and social impacts on Egypt. So that's what I was interested in doing. And I wrote a paper that was then published and turned over to the United Nations.
And it's so interesting. My Philippines went through something similar to that. In the 70s, a wave of nurses made their way to Saudi Arabia, my mom included. And that's where they kind of established their careers before migrating over, immigrating over to America. So that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Just swapping just a little bit of gears. I know, man, you know Tagalog better than me, which is amazing. So you're obviously well-traveled and everything else. And when we met, you know, you were already involved with volunteering and being a full-time realtor and so many other things happening. How did you find that balance or strike that balance between being involved in our real estate, our real estate volunteering with the industry from a not political, but from a government standpoint and association standpoint, and strike the balance with, hey, you have clients that depend on you and work through you. Yeah, you can take the last 10 minutes and kind of pair that together and also share why it is that you're running for board of director, or all of us. I don't think everyone's fully voted yet, but you're on that ballot with SRAR. So if you'd love to share that too, that'd be great.
Sure. Well, again, I referenced my grandmother. My grandmother was my North Star when I finally decided to go into real estate. Just let me step back. As I mentioned, it's my third career. So my first career after graduate school was in international banking and finance, where I traversed the globe and I dealt with American Fortune 500, 1,000 companies domiciled overseas. And then eventually found my spouse to be, got married, and couldn't travel for months at a time, and then went into the corporate world in treasury investments and finance, and eventually was chief financial officer at a couple of corporations. Left that, and in deference to my family, I got a real estate license in 1991 that I'd never used. So took off time after leaving the corporate world while my kids were young, and played fatherly role and shuttled them up and back to schools and from. And then decided to employ my license in 2002, and I joined Coldwell Banker Realty, Coldwell Banker in Studio City, where I've been for the past 20 years. Philip raises the question about service. My grandmother, in her inaugural speech as the president of Los Angeles Realty Board, spoke similar to these words, and that is, life is not measured by the wealth you accumulate, by the years you have lived, but by the service you have rendered. And those words always resonated within me. So I joined, as I say, Coal Bank in 2002, and was working steadily and building my real estate practice and becoming known. And then 10 years in 2012, I was bit by the service bug. I just said, listen, I'm involved in the neighborhood councils. For those of you who may be familiar with it, I've been on the Sherman Oaks Neighborhood Council now for 14 years and was serving the community and was interested in advocacy in the political side of things. And Southland Regional proved to be a good resource and outlet for that. So the very first committees that I joined were governmental affairs, of which I'm still on to this day. In fact, I serve as the vice chair, and technology. But initially, I questioned myself. I said, this is a fair amount of time commitment. It's going to take away from my business. So I was somewhat selfish, and I said, what's in it for me? And I looked around, and I noticed all the other volunteers, people like Philip, and perhaps some of you too, whom I haven't had a chance to acquaint. But there's so much to be gained from giving of yourself to the association and what you can get back. One of the most underplayed part of the association is the value of networking. And I say that because I meet people at SRAR that if I was siloed at Coldwell Banker in Studio City and just doing my practice in that area, I probably would never meet. And my philosophy is each and every person who you meet is an opportunity for you to interact, but for them to enrich you and for you to enrich them. And I found that to be the case. If you come to view networking as a threefold thing. Number one, it's an opportunity to develop a relationship. Number two, possibly even a friendship. And third, it could be a business opportunity too, in terms of potential referral or collaboration. So that's very important.
That's awesome, Howard. Hey, real quick, we have a question from one of our team leaders, Sonia.
Sure.
Sonia, fire away real quick.
Hey, Sonia. Good morning.
Hey, Howard. Good morning. Oh, can you guys hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Hey, thank you so much for sharing. What an incredible story. And for me, what I was thinking when you were talking about your mother and your grandmother, about how all the things they had to jump through, all the hoops, and really make it happen, like any means possible. Obviously, she had to have a place to live. And just like any means possible, it just got me back to thinking about agents today and wealth building and, the opportunities that we have, especially within our offices right now. We can really build that wealth, that multi-generational wealth, and make an impact in the community, but we have to really go for it. Like nothing is ever easy, and it's never, everything is always relatively easy, right? Like you look back at those times and you look back at different things, and yeah, there are obstacles today too, and they might be different, but it's about how you make it happen, how resourceful can you be, and seeing that bigger end result. So thank you for reminding me of that this morning.
Sure.
That's
sure.
such a great story. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, let me tell you this. When I came into real estate, my sole intention was I came into it because I wanted to help people. I came from a place of wanting to render service to people. And I think that that is one of the most important values that any realtor can carry into their life and into their business. Because there are too many of us who are mesmerized by the shining object there, known as a commission check. And you're merely looking at the fiscal outcome. But the impact that you can have on your clients, it goes far beyond that, truly. I mean, Sonia here elicited the point about home ownership. And this is something that associations stand for. I mean, we stand for, primarily we stand for promoting home ownership. We stand for generational wealth building. We stand for securing and protecting private property rights and also protecting our ability to practice real estate and do what we do. So, if I may reference too, as I mentioned, getting involved in governmental affairs. I heed you all, and I emphasize heed, capital HEED. Pay attention to what's going on in the world around you. Listen to what's going on down at City Hall in Los Angeles. Listen to what's happening up in California State in the Assembly and the Senate. Listen to what's happening back in Washington, D.C., both in the House and the Senate, the executive and the judicial. Those are so very important. And so much of the legislation that comes forward, well, as recently demonstrated by all the housing bills that Governor Newsom signed, have some tangential or direct relationship to real estate. Right now, how many of you are aware of what's going on with the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C.? Let's have a show of hands. I'm putting up 2 for those of you who might not put up any. There was a lawsuit brought against essentially it's against the real estate industry, against MLSs and such, that when resolved is going to have a major impact on the way that realtors do business.
Yes.
I mean, but the things that are under discussion or the bits and pieces that come down from NAR could have major ramifications in terms
Just
of.
just to summarize real quick, we have to transition out, but on that topic, it really has major ramifications on compensation, commissions, disclosure around commissions, how commissions are collected. Just for everyone on the call right now, just think of it this way. Right now, we see MLS, we're paid essentially through whatever the listing side is offering, sellers essentially offering. Now imagine bringing a buyer in and just saying, hey, I'm going to collect my compensation from you, here's my fee. Right. I mean, there's a lot of things going on right now that unfortunately we are privy to, because there is just a matter of involvement and taking action. And to kind of summarize it, because I'm getting bombarded here on the background. To kind of transition over, all of us have an opportunity to vote for our leadership, right? At least at the board level, Southland Regional Association of Realtors. If you haven't taken the time to vote yet, either way, get to know Howard. Amazing. Part 2 to that is, when you go through your membership login, there's an opportunity to vote. You can vote 7 people out of 8. You can't vote any more than 7. If all you know is Howard and whoever else, just click his name, hit submit, off it goes, and give our organization the best representation possible in terms of having someone who really knows their stuff and can bring that dynamic to our board level. I want to thank real quickly Rachel Tabak. Thank you. Howard, she talked to me a few weeks back. And I'm like, hey, I don't know, but if you want to interview someone, you should really interview Howard. And I'm like, yes, holy cow, we should totally bring Howard on here. And you know, you're such a wealth of information, Howard. We need to have like an assembly type update, because there's, I don't know, I think there's like 7 or 8 things we're voting on in the upcoming election, or, you know, most of us got our mail-in ballots already. And there's 7 or 8 of those bad boys that really just kind of focus in and hone in on real estate in our local area, right? If you're open to maybe not on a Friday morning, maybe something with a little bit more time, we can have you back as a guest speaker. If I can get a show of hands or an amen or a heck yeah or a clap or some sort of emotion from everyone on the screen, that'd be really cool, just to kind of get an idea of who's down for that. Okay, we got Sonia, Rachel, I got a thumbs up, and I'm sure everyone who's driving is like, yay. Thank you, Jasmine. So absolutely, I mean, this was impactful, Howard, and thank you so much for your time today.
Can I close out with just 2 more things?
Please do.
Yep. Listen, as I mentioned to you, come from a place of service. Remember that you are not a party to the transaction. Do not insert yourself into it. You are the fiduciary. You represent the buyer, the seller, and or both. And that's the most important thing, is that you don't go and speak on behalf of your client. You speak on behalf of them, but you don't speak your mind about what should be happening. And then number 2, a phrase that I've created that I want to promulgate, distribute, share far and wide, and that is, be a collegial competitor. Remember those words, be a collegial competitor. And I define collegial competition as being 3 elements. Number 1 is to communicate. Number 2 is to cooperate. And number 3 is to collaborate. And if you do that, come from a place of service, you will be successful. I can guarantee it. Mind you, when I went into real estate as my 3rd career, I had a full head of hair at the outset. I do not now. I will not attribute it to real estate. So yeah, I made up for the difference with the facial hair. So
Love you, Howard. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for jumping on. And very cool. Take care. See you, everyone.
Thank
Howard,
you.
I'll call you afterwards. Thank you.
And make sure to vote in the SRAR election.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, and take care, everyone. Stay
Thanks,
blessed.
Phil.
Woo.